Morning, my friends. I'm Pastor Ben Hayes from First Baptist Church, Dadeville, Alabama, bringing you our thought for the day. What a beautiful day God has given to us today. Great day to come out at 10 o'clock for men's and women's Bible studies. Tonight at 4:45, our family night supper. 5:45, we got a ladies' Bible study and going through Ephesians. We got our prayer meeting and Bible study. We got our children and youth activities. 6 o'clock handbell practice, 7 o'clock choir practice. Busy day today, so come and join us for all of that. But right now, let's go back to Romans chapter 11 as we're talking about this passage. And Paul is dealing with this issue between the Jews and the Gentiles coming into the kingdom. And remember, Paul's heart is that all Jewish people would be saved. And he's been hitting this heart over and over again. And he says, listen, you Gentiles, don't get the big head here. Understand, God has grafted you into the olive tree because he wants to make Israel jealous so that they will come back into the right relationship with him. And so he tells us, he says literally, listen, you were grafted in, right? So don't get this big head. Don't be haughty because, he could just as easily graft you out, right? And so that's where we are as we pick up in verse 22. He says, consider the goodness and severity of God. We talked about this yesterday. On those who fell, severity, talking about the Jewish nation who refused to believe in Jesus as Messiah. But toward you, the Gentiles who had trusted in Christ and become a part of the church, he says, to you goodness, if you continue in his goodness. And listen to me. Paul is not teaching the ability to lose your salvation here. He is trying to make a point. He's trying to make a point. And he says, and that's why he says in verse 21, he may not spare you either. He wants us to understand that God can do anything that he wants to do. But he's chosen this route. He's promised us eternal security. And he says in verse 23, and they also, if they do not continue in unbelief, will be grafted in, for God is able to graft them in again. For if you were cut out of the olive tree, which is wild by nature, and were grafted contrary to nature into a cultivated olive tree, talking about Gentiles, how much more will these who are natural branches be grafted into their own olive tree? Do you see it? He's saying, listen, God can do anything he wants to, but it's only natural to understand this. You take a branch from a wild olive tree, you graft it into the natural olive tree, and it takes great, amazing. But how much easier to take a branch that has been taken off of the natural olive tree and the cultivated olive tree and put back into that. Just a whole lot easier. God can do that. That's what Paul is hoping for. And ultimately, one day we will see this. I think it will be at the end of time. I think it will be at the midpoint of the tribulation period, actually, when the Jewish people who are still on earth realize who the Antichrist is and what he's done. And they recognize that all of this that has been taught, all of this has been proclaimed through the years, has come true, and they will acknowledge Jesus as Messiah. And at that moment, the nation of Israel, those who are still on the earth, will be saved. Now think about this. This is an amazing promise that God has given to us. We've been brought into the kingdom. We've been brought into the kingdom with a purpose, just like the Apostle Paul, to go forth and proclaim the gospel, to reach the lost with the hope of the gospel, bringing them into the family, just like we were brought into the family. And at the same time praying for the nation of Israel that they would respond to the mercies of God and they would return to him in faith and belief that Jesus is the Messiah. That's the goal. That's the hope. And ultimately it's going to happen. Listen to what he says in verse 25. For I do not desire, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own opinion, that blindness in part has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. Wow. God has done this for us. The blindness of the Jewish people so that we could be saved. And when all of the Gentiles who are going to come into the kingdom have come into the kingdom, that's when the nation of Israel will return to him. When's that going to happen? I think midpoint of tribulation. I think that's exactly what he's talking about here in verse 26. And so all Israel will be saved. Think about that. God has a plan. From before the creation of the world, God had this plan to bring all of this together to this ultimate culmination that we so look forward to when we will be the church, the bride of Christ. I love it. I hope you do too. Be blessed, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.